What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore, and we do that by highlighting the practitioners that make this the best field in athletics. Before we get into today's episode, please hit that subscribe button. It does not cost you any money, but it helps the show grow so we can reach more coaches. Today's episode, I talk with my fellow colleague, Amit Vora, about plenty of things, mainly about why we have to actually do conditioning work. And it sounds great in team sport to avoid the middle zone, but what happens when your sport lives in the middle zone? This is something that Amit and I used to talk about all the time at Towson, and we elaborate on this real deep in this episode. Not only the high days and low days, but the fact you have to have some of these middle zone days. We also talk about what it takes to run a successful organization, how to run a good basketball team. Amit has success winning the league, men's and women's basketball. You're going to love this episode. Here at Strength Coach Network, we pride ourselves on giving you the best quality information from strength and conditioning coaches and practitioners that still work with or have worked with athletes. This is not theory. We are always about giving you practical information that you can apply day one the minute you're done listening to this. And you can check us out for a $1 trial in the link down below. Click that link and find out more about us.
I guess whatever it's called, Pan Am Games kind of thing like that. So she got
Crystal
me this
Johnson?
shirt. No, Crystal Cuevo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so she got this. She just graduated this year, but she got me this shirt from down there.
I mean, but like you've trained so many fast athletes that like it is hard to lose track of. Like, let's call it what it is.
Yeah, for sure.
How you been? Good to see you, bro.
Man.
You look
you
good.
Too, bro. You too, man. This has been good, man. Just like I said, getting ready for another one coming up. Got a boy.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So I got one of each now.
You guys are you went from playing zone defense to man.
No, yeah. The dog throws in a little wrinkle in there, but you know.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
My goodness, you are just hands full.
Man, I'm just trying to catch up with you.
We don't have a dog. Diesel died pretty much the minute we moved here.
Yeah. But man, how the little ones doing? How's the family?
They're good. They've been home with me. You know, summertime, so like took them to the gym and stuff, like I said. But they start school next week. When does school start out there?
She's got like
She's still at Celebrate?
No. We tell you, she's at the daycare now at Towson. The Celebrate we were at. The Celebrate you were at was probably better than the Celebrate we were at, man. Because like the one out in Cockeysville, we didn't like it that much at all. Like
I forgot about how dope the daycare was right at school. I forgot about that.
That one was good, man. So she goes there. They have all the student workers. So some of my track girls work with her too, because they're at the daycare and they're doing their teaching program and all that. So it's been good. But is my connection pretty good here?
You look great, yeah.
Our connection is good. It kind of breaks in and out for you a little bit, but when I'm looking at your screen,
I hear you loud and clear, and you're visual too. Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, no, but so that's been good, man. School though, we start up training the 25th.
Next
Monday, yeah, and then the baby's due September 2nd. So
literally
it
the
could
next
be
Tuesday.
any day. So.
I wanted you to come on to talk about like this is essentially just continuing a conversation that we had at Towson all the time.
Oh yeah.
Like, you used to say it to me all the time, like, okay, Justin, if the GPS is talking about the middle shows up the most, why don't we train the middle? Like, and this is something that Tyler Franklin, I'm not sure if you know who Tyler is, but he's a high school strength coach. He's been on the show before, and he's kind of been he's been like driving the needle of it. And he kind of talks about feed the dogs instead of feed the cats, because he's like, listen, only training max velo, like it sounds great, but to say that there's no conditioning aspect in sports is just naive and wrong.
I agree, man, because I think people take it, and we've talked about this before, everybody takes this high-low model from Charlie Francis and from a track background and everything like that and try to apply it to, all team sports aspects. And there's certain things you can take from there, but you can't take it, it works well with football to a certain extent just because of the energy systems involved with it. Right. But still, like you said, right, there's a lot of conditioning aspects involved with that as well. Right. That you need to have. But when you get to team sports, a little bit more like your lacrosses, your field hockeys, your basketballs and everything like that, I think that model you gotta shift away from hey, it's just high velocity or, high days, low days, you start to realize that you got to look into what is high for your sport, right? And what is low for your sport, because it's not the same as a 100-meter sprinter. Even a high day for a 400-meter sprinter compared to a 100-meter sprinter is completely different, right? You're talking about their velocities based off maybe not their max velocity on a 100-meter for a 400-meter sprinter, but maybe you're working off a percentage of their best time for their 400-meter time. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you're training it a little bit differently depending on the sport, the event, the energy systems required for each uh, event or sport. And I think otherwise you end up kind of just following along a trend that sounds good in theory, but doesn't really work if you don't make those adjustments toward the demands of the sport, if that makes sense.
See, right here, this is exactly why I wanted to have you on. And anybody that's listening, you don't have the same knowledge that I have. Amit, you ran track, you play basketball. Like you're the guy that's always ready to play basketball. Like you're always a team sport. Like you're like, so he did track, but plays basketball all the time as like a competitive recreational person. But you also train the track and field team, and you also train the basketball team. So like you live in this world, which is exactly why I wanted to have you on to talk about it, because anybody listening right now, they can't instantly be like, oh, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. No, actually he does. And he lives in both worlds.
Yeah. No, it's cool, man. Like, cause like how we talked about all the time, man. It was like all of us as sports performance coaches. A lot of us grew up kind of 90% of us came up in the lifting realm, right? We wanted to lift, and that's part of our job, right? We wanted to learn how to, we want to know what 80% feels like for 5 sets of whatever, 4 or 3, whatever it is. We want to lift to understand what training feels like before we give it to our athletes, right? But at the same time, you look at it from the other aspect of just being athletic, movement, conditioning aspects of it is so much different that we don't really touch on in our field. I feel like more and more strength coaches and sports performance coaches just need to get out and play a sport, right? Do something like that so they actually get a feel for what that actually feels like. Playing 3-on-3 and feeling what gas feels like from there, instead of just doing, hey, I'm going to do tempo runs today, right? Nothing against tempo runs. I think they're great, but to me, tempo runs are like the 5x5 of condition. They're great for fitness. You're gonna get great fitness out of them, right? And it's going to help you, especially from a GPP standpoint, from a rhythm standpoint, from if you're really focusing on technical aspects of running, right? And there's so many ways you can go the 8-vector approach and all that, and change directions to get some preparation for changing direction. There's a lot of good out of that, but at the same time, I think you got to feel a little bit more of the suck part of it, right? In that middle zone, right? That anaerobic.
Vacations are meant for you to be outside doing things that you love and reconnecting with your family and your friends and recharging your battery. It is not meant for you to travel and listen to some coach talk in a conference hall and eat some food that you know really isn't the best thing that you want to be eating. Take back your vacations and do so with a Strength Coach Network annual membership. When you purchase an annual membership, you're going to get access to our course, Performance Coaching 101. In the subsequent years, it'll renew and you'll get access to 102 and 103. Each year, you're going to get access to 2 NSCA CEUs and 10 CSCCa CEUs. These CEUs will allow you to be able to learn from the comfort of your office. You'll be able to earn CEUs on your time rather than having to travel. Take back your vacation and be able to do this with a Strength Coach Network annual membership. Click the link down below for more information.
And the area where we're like, oh, we got to avoid it because Charlie Francis says we got to avoid it, right? And it's like, for me, like when I look at basketball, that is my high, right? The most high intensity period is all in the middle. It's not a high velocity sprint. It's not a slow jog. It's cut, sprint, cut, get back to this, right? Movement all over the place. Stop, go, jump, redirect your body, all that stuff with contact. And, from there, you really get into more of a kind of anaerobic area where that's the most riskiest part for my guys. That's why I got to get them prepared for it. Because if you fall, your conditioning is short in that area, you're not able to buffer laxate, you're not able to hang at those middle grounds for long periods of time. Well, now you start compensating because you're fatigued, and that's when injury starts to occur. Or you're not able to perform at the highest level that you think you could be. So I think those areas you have to touch. Now you also have to look, like we talked about before, all right, what did the sport bring to us, right? Or how much are we getting out of the actual piece of playing basketball or playing lacrosse or whatever it is. And once you kind of see, all right, this is what I'm getting from here, right? Now you can kind of work backwards to be like, all right, do I need to make sure they feel what the highest demand could be in a game? So if it's like for us, like we've had a time period where we've gone almost 12 minutes without a media timeout.
You've talked
right?
about this before with me, yep.
Yeah, so it's like, that was like you could just see the fatigue. And our coach is like, I'm not calling it. I'm not calling it. He's not going to be the one to throw in the towel. He's like, you guys going to keep fighting out there. So I've had with practices even, like I've had the coach be like, hey, coach, I want to play. Let's play. We'll work up to this overtime with our practice planning. But we'll be like, let's work up to an 8-minute game, right? 8-minute game, no stoppages, right? Just make them play, right? And that should be the area we work up to where it's just like, I want them to feel what not having a media feels like because they're going to be in those situations. Or even from a conditioning standpoint, right? If we're doing something on the back end of practice, I know they're getting the volume for practice. They're getting plenty of load, plenty of volume and all that stuff. So maybe it's not like, hey, we're going to do a lot of volume on the back end, but maybe it's power intervals, right? It's 1 minute down and back on the court as hard as you can, right? You're trying to get, for our guys, we'll usually shoot for 9 to 10 reps of lengths of the court in 1 minute. Take 2 minutes off, do it again kind of thing, right? But it's almost like you're trying to make them get into those really high anaerobic zones where they don't just extremes, so they're prepared for it if it happens, right? And just kind of touch into those areas.
The question that I had there was like, all right, if you know that you've done a 12-minute before, do you personally, you're never been like, hey, coach, let's push it. Let's do a 12. Let's do a 13. Let's do a 14. Not all the time, but have you, and again, my question is me being the psychopathic, hey, I know we've touched a 12 before. I want to be able to tell the coach that we've done a 12 or a 13 in training just to then try to get some buy-in and be like, hey, coach, we did 12 before. Those GPSs that we measured, this is going to dictate our conditioning because, the conditioning, or excuse me, the GPS told us we did a 12. Hey, I'm getting buy-in with you by saying we're using the GPS to dictate conditioning. Hey, let them go play live for 13 minutes, coach, because we did 12 before. We want to be better than we were last year. Like, did that conversation or thought ever come up in your head?
Yeah. So that was kind of where we kind of what we have done with him. He's bought in over the course of the year a little bit more every year. Where we've been like, hey, we're going to start with, if we're looking at our practice planning going in a 20-hour period from 8 to 20, like first 2 weeks might be, hey, we're going to do no contact. We're just going to get them in the flow coming off the summer, right? The 3 weeks off. The next 2 weeks, we're going to start introducing more contact drills, live play drills. And then as we get into actual 20-hour practices, hey, let's do 3 to 4 sets of 4-minute games, right? And then we'll work up our 6-minute games, then 8-minute games, right? And then we might do, usually what ends up happening, we actually did this last year. We played 2 12-minute games. And one of them was what we did was I told coach, I was like, let's push it so they have I don't want any immediate, no timeouts, right? We're just going to kind of push them through, right? And the next game, then we said, all right, we're going to have some medias in there, right? But part of that was mainly just so they feel what that feels like for the team, right? And we did that with our main 10 guys, so the 5 and 5. The other guys didn't get that experience, but like you said, it's important to, I think, touch those, right? Just so you get a feel for it a little bit. But at the same time, like within your conditioning, leading up to that, it's like, all right, well, you don't need to have that much volume because of the nature of practice a lot of time with basketball, but let's program some things maybe on the back aspect of practice where we're getting into some anaerobic capacity work, right? Where they start learning to buffer. We maybe touch some, not really anaerobic power, but we'll do 1 minute works, Tabata, stuff like that. And I got away this year. This is the first year I'll say I got away from doing anything conditioning wise over the summer. I didn't even touch them conditioning. We just straight lifted and we did some speed work, change of direction work, right? Reason being because I keep feeling that every time I send them home for 3-4 weeks at the end of the summer, it's like we come back, we start over, right? To a certain extent. So it's like, all right, I'm going to let practice handle it this summer. And we did our conditioning test at the end because I'm just curious to see what we would be at. And we do a Celtic test, 3-minute run. But a lot of guys were either close to their best from last year or like somewhere right below it for the first time running it at the end of summer with no condition. So I'm like, all right, so guys were able to, maintain decently well. And now from here, now we can kind of push that a little bit more and get them prepared to handle more higher amounts of kind of like that anaerobic capacity work that they might feel, especially as we get to 20 hours, because we're going to play a lot of live play. It ends up getting like 45 minutes to an hour of live play certain days of the week, how we design our practices throughout the week. So just getting them prepared to handle what that feels like, almost like the suck, right? You know what I'm saying? Like it's just the nastiness of that anaerobic work.
TeamBuildr has been my trusted source for online software programs for my athletes since 2019. Since then, they've continued to grow. They have this new practice integration where practice planning can integrate with the sport coach. You have your sports science, your AMS, the questionnaires. They've continued to evolve and keep giving you the things that you need. It has made my life easier as a strength coach. I want the same for you. You do not need to keep printing on lift cards. Please, printing on lift cards in Excel, you don't need to do that. If you need help being able to purchase it, they have a pre-written grant on their website. They're also part owners in the Plyomat with Coach Rich Burnett. So if you need to get a good device that can accurately and validly and quickly get your jump height and ground contact time, so now you can get RSI, Plyomat's a great choice. We utilize that at Goldfinch. Check TeamBuildr. Check them out in the link down below. Please stop printing on lift cards. It's going to make your life easier. It's going to make your athlete's life easier. It's easier to program on the back end. Check out TeamBuildr in the link down below.
Especially in those when we don't have those medias and say we're full court pressing or something, we're going over some kind of concept on the court. It's going to create constraints that make it harder.
Well, I mean, and that's exactly what you talked about, like to psychologically know. And Kier talked about this before, where he had one of the guys from Argentina, because yes, Kier has been kind of vocal back when he owned Strength Coach Network, and occasionally if he chimes in, but like, hey, work on max output, works on max recoverability. But one of the guys at Argentina was like, listen, until you've played the All Blacks in New Zealand and you've kind of had to go and had that suck and had that lactate threat, like, you want to psychologically know that you've been there and handled some of that with some of these shuttle, middle of the zone work. And that's where he'd talk about, like, all right, as training camp would be coming up towards the end of your off-season prep, throwing that kind of icing, lactate, suck work, so that way they know that they've been there for that psychological preparation too.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think, like, it's I think, when me and Chad Workman, he's at Louisville right now. We talked about something similar to this before, but we talked about maybe a yo-yo test, right? And we said there's 3 different kind of athletes that might get the same score on a yo-yo test, right? But they're getting it 3 different ways, right? So you might have one kid who gets it because he's twitched up. He's one of those ectomorphs, a little bit skinnier, got really good tendon ability, right? His fascial ability, he can get out, bounce out of cuts in and out pretty quick. He's springy, right? And you got another kid who just buffers lactate really well, can hang in that middle ground. And so they keep going, right? And then you got another kid who's just really good aerobically, right? Really good aerobically, doesn't have the higher speed, higher, whatever it is, doesn't buffer as well, but has great aerobic capacity and can kind of stay at a lower heart rate, whatever it is, right? But they all get the same score. And we'll see that sometimes, right, when you look at a yo-yo. But they all got it 3 different ways, right? So when I look at even like yo-yo tests, like that's a gauge of fitness, not really of a certain capacity of like energy systems, because just the nature of the test is like how far can you go in the test? You're testing a test at the end of the day. But I think with that kind of goes into that buffering person, right, that middle guy. To me, that's basketball. Like if you're able to buffer well, right, and be able to maintain, because you're going to get there no matter what. The speed of the play is going to get there, the intensity of the play, especially if you're a high-paced team, right, depending on your playing style. But if you can have those kind of kids, or get kids who maybe a little bit more aerobic-based or maybe more nervous system-based, and try to get them better at buffering a little bit more and have a better anaerobic capacity, I think that makes a big difference from a performance standpoint on the court, and also from, like I said before, limiting that compensation aspect when they get fatigued.
Anybody listening to that, they're like, okay, how do you make the kid that's tendony and springy, what would you like? Hearing all of that, I instantly thought of like mod, wow, RSI mod, or jumping on a force plate where anybody can have the different, jump height on a jump mat, but we can't really see like eccentric rate of force development or any of those kind of qualities to kind of figure out what's going on under the hood. What I'm kind of asking and getting to with you is like, all right, if you kind of know you've got all three of those kind of athletes running that Celtic test, are you then going to try to condition them each differently in the off season, or what ways are you going to try to improve the weaknesses but still operate from a system of strength based on whatever athlete you're dealing with? Oh, and by the way, let's not mention the fact that you're still trying to work in a team sport and keep everybody kind of doing the same exact thing to handle that culture, team camaraderie, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think when you think about the three different kind of kids you might have, and I think about the team right now, we have those kind of kids, right? Guys who can just kind of go for days, don't really have great output, right? But they can kind of just run at the same pace, slower a little bit, not as fast. And then we got the guys who just twitched up, get out of cuts and everything like that. Now, I think a lot of times when you, from an energy system standpoint, a cardiovascular standpoint, you could train them all pretty similarly, right? Because you're not really training tendon aspects of this when you're doing this conditioning aspect of it, right? Especially when the goal is, hey, I want to train a certain capacity or certain area of that continuum of the energy systems. So I think if you're leaning toward a little bit more of those higher outputs, right, but at the same time longer durations, you're going to end up getting into some of the anaerobic capacity like we're talking about. I've done stuff where, for me, I've taken their Celtic test and try to individualize somewhat with using MAS with that, right? So I'll just take 3 minutes. All right, cool. I'll measure out what distance they got. And then from there, the distance divided by 180 seconds, whatever, right? You'll get your MAS to a certain extent, individualized. Now you can program off that. So when we do our Tabatas, I have them do Tabatas running a certain distance, and I usually have 2 or 3 groups of like. And the interesting thing is when you do that, you end up having the difference is not very high, but it does make a difference. So I have a group maybe running 20 yards, another group running 21 yards, another group running 22 yards, right? When I'm doing these Tabatas on the court. So it's like down, back, you get 10 seconds off, then you do it again, right? And usually it's somewhere within those ranges. And then, but they'll get that kind of capacity or that buffering capacity that I'm looking for from training like that, right? And then when you do stuff, yeah. So it's like it is significant. Like it does make a difference. Like I'll tell guys, if you feel good, bump up a little bit more. Like, try to go to, if you're a 20 group, try to get to 21. If you're 21, try to get to 22, right? And I think, from that standpoint, they all need that conditioning. But when you think about like the tendon aspect of things, right, that's where the other training comes in, right? Your springy guys are naturally going to get a little bit better in and out of cuts, right? Which makes a difference when it comes to some of that conditioning. If you're more, I guess, fascially aligned, like some of that nervous system aspect of it, if that helps you, right, take away some of that energy that you need because you're just elastic, right, to move, well, that's great, right? That helps you out being able to keep a higher output for longer periods of time, right?
Yeah, you're changing directions easier because you're just using that, like exactly. You said, the elasticity of the tendon versus kind of being more muscular driven to get in and out of your cuts. And like that, you're buying fractions of a second in and out of your changes. Now, maybe then people might say like, okay, that same tendinous person might, who knows what their aerobic system is like or their energy system development is like, and maybe they can't sustain it, but they can buy back some time because they're in and out of their cuts faster, and you're having to change direction more often because of the sport they're playing.
Yeah, exactly. And right. And some of the things that, with that, that's why it's like, you got to train, it's almost separate, right? You're training some of the fascial aspects or tendinous aspects of things. And this, what I'm talking about, you're training the more energy systems aspect. And so we'll do, typically when we do our Tabatas or something like that, we might go, we have 4 different groups. One of the groups is running. One of the groups is on the bike. One of the groups is doing ropes. One of the groups is doing some of the med ball work that we're just mixing in, right? And, when you're on the bike or you're on the ropes, you take out some of that tendinous aspect of it. So they're just getting the cardiovascular push of that, right? So I think it benefits all. It doesn't really matter if you're more lactic or like a more aerobic or better buffering or nervous system kid.
Hawken Dynamics is my preferred choice for force plates and for handheld dynamometers. Made in the USA up in Maine, I have been using them since 2020 when I was at Towson University. Still use them at Goldfinch today, and I brought the plates to the high school that I've trained at. We will use the plates and transport them when we train athletes at the many different high schools that we currently work at. As I said, they are a handheld dynamometer as well with the True Strength. You can assess athlete internal, external rotation, hip, AB, adduction, calf strength, hip, whatever you want to assess, you can do with the True Strength. It also has the ability to pair with the difference striking machine, so now you can see single strike, multiple strike. Check out Hawken Dynamics down in the link down below.
I think it benefits all if you do that, but I think you just got to notice that there will be kids who are naturally going to be better at hanging out in those high output areas for longer just because of the way their system is set up. Right, they're just able to have a higher outputs easier, right? So if you have those kids, that's great, right? So I think that's where it is benefit to work on, maybe a kid who's not as twitched up or doesn't have those tendinous qualities that you may want from a high performer athletically. Working on those in the weight room, because you'll see that would probably benefit them conditioning wise. So it's like same thing as if you have a guy who's heavier, right, and you have him lose 20 pounds, right? They should be able to hang a little bit better during the same activity that they were doing when they were 20 pounds heavier, right? You're just changing some aspects, and now they're a little bit more fit enough to handle that.
Well, one of the reasons that I really care about, and I think Tyler does too, with this whole you can only do max output and then max recoverability is, I think that can really apply at certain positions in football at the highest level. But when you go down to the FCS level, we don't have as many media timeouts as they have in the NFL, Power 4. It doesn't happen as much. And then when you also look myopically at the sport of football and say, oh, well, they're all, alactic, aerobic. What an offensive lineman does is completely different than what a DB does, or even a wide receiver that gets subbed out. Like the O-line, they don't get subbed out. It's a completely different position. And I guess I'm just so obsessed about it because I had never thought about it before. And I kind of just blindly was like, oh, well, like you said, Tony Holler said it or whatever. And it's like, I was a little bit misguided in completely thinking only that way because I did negate the individualness of the different positions. And I'm kicking myself, and I don't want other coaches to do the same thing. So that's why I kind of just have been shouting it from the rooftops lately.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. I think that's why I think the good thing I see in the field, a lot more grappling work with our offensive linemen and defensive linemen, right? Like you said, they don't really get a break, but that to me, that grappling work and everything you're doing that, a certain amount of time on, a certain amount of time off, that's the conditioning they need to a certain extent, right? It's specific. It's you're getting your heart rate up, you're getting the cardiovascular approach, plus you're getting the contacts and all that stuff that they would see in games, right? And doing that for a certain amount of time, getting them into extreme aspects of that. Maybe it's hurry up, right? Hey, normally we would have this much time. Hey, this time you're going to get back and do this again. We might do 6 sets of 6 seconds with only 10 seconds rest or something.
Well, that's exactly what I did, because we were timing all of the work to rest during games, and we'd be like, all right, hey, this is this was the average amount of plays, the average amount of rest. Then we would figure out okay, what was the highest number of plays we had, the maximum amount of rest, and then the minimum amount of rest. And then we would get kind of statistics sometimes, be like, hey, the most amount of plays we had before was 12. So we might run 10 plays in a row. And if the shortest amount of time between ball snaps was 25 seconds, we might do 10 reps where it's 25 seconds is all of your that's the rest period. And we might just do, a 15-yard sprint with a 5-yard change in direction vertically back for the linemen, and the skill guys might go 20 yards and back. But we would do that on that modified short rest period. And we would tell the guys too, hey, we're doing this because we're simulating, up-tempo offense, like you said, 2-minute, whatever we're trying to simulate.
Yeah.
Defense, hey, we're playing an up-tempo offense. I want them to know psychologically, not that we've done mat drills or any of those other silly things, but hey, we've done conditioning with minimal rest, so that way you can go out there and execute in the game.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think that's what it comes back to is like when you look at it from a basketball aspect, it's like they're not really hitting high end speeds or anything like that. They're getting a lot of accelerations and stuff and decelerations, and from a cardiovascular standpoint, right? If we can just get them better at hanging out in that range and in that, or being able to buffer and handle cutting more often, right, and doing things like that conditioning wise, you end up preparing them just better from a physiological standpoint, cardiovascular standpoint, and all that, so they just perform better and stay healthy. Yeah.
Well, one thing I just thought about was how often you and I would talk about like even just the different player loads that we would have in practice that you had versus a practice that we had, and how low the player load was for football versus basketball, and just how much that goes into the energy cost of changing direction. So strength coaches out there listening, if you're only doing max output work and then like your max recoverability work, which isn't really that middle zone work, well, now you're not doing some of the most difficult change in direction work that your athletes are eventually going to see. You're under training them. Powerlift has been my choice for strength and conditioning equipment ever since I got into the field. Right now, I still have their racks, I have their barbells, I have their bumpers, specialty bars, and we have the IMTP device at Goldfinch, and it's been great for us because it's allowed us to free up the rack where we used to have to do the IMTPs. Now we use that IMTP device, roll it around, we've created more space. You have to check them out. Doesn't matter if in your college, high school, pro, tactical, or private, they have the ability to make whatever customizations and whatever adjustments you need. I was a part of the weight room that was the 32 brand new rack facility at Iowa football. You see what they did for TCU football. Doesn't matter how big, how small, whatever your customizations are, Powerlift is number one in the exercise equipment space for a reason. Check them out in the link down below. And let's all remember, our main job is to prepare the athletes for practice so that way they can stay on the court. And if you're not doing that, like you had said before, like get them ready to practice, then we're just completely not doing our job.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like a lot of times, like we'll work on, for me, when it comes to change of direction, a lot more the mechanical aspects of it, right? And I'll touch on that at least 2-3 times a week. Maybe right after our warm up, we'll touch on that for maybe 5-6 minutes, doing something like that, just to work on the mechanical and technical aspects, how we want them to see and read and approach certain things, right? And then, but a lot of times they get the volume of that in practice, right? So I don't need to do as much of it, right? But I need to touch on, hey, how do we do it a little bit better, right? But I know they're going to get the volume of it, and then working with the coaching staff, we try to really pinpoint, hey, defensively, how we want them to move to make the most impact on the offensive team and take away space, right? But looking at load and everything like that, how we talked about with, football, basketball, and this is a big rant I've gone on with the office a lot, and then just talking to other people is, not all load is created equal, right, at all. You might have, like you said, you might have a 300 load. I might have a 300 load. Your load may have came from, an hour, 15 minutes. My 300 load may have came from 45 minutes, right, of doing stuff. And now the player load per minute is different, right? And then you look at explosive efforts, which is our custom metric that we use at Towson, right? Just looking at high MA, XL, decel, left and right, lateral movements. But when you look at all that, right, it's a big puzzle piece you have to kind of solve when you're looking at player load. I think a lot of times we get, as performance coaches who have this technology, we look at, oh, well, they had we only planned to have, 350 today, but we had 400 today. And we were only playing, we were, 10% above our game average for this, or, too low for our player load per minute for this. And I think when you start doing that too much, though, you're missing the bigger picture, because you also have to take in the context of practice. All right, what did we do at practice? Right, what were the drills we're doing? Right, and now it all paints a picture. Maybe it was harder than what you thought it was. Maybe it was easier than what you thought it was. Right, how long did we go at practice? Right, and if you just look at those three numbers, though, like your play load per minute, your explosive efforts, or maybe your high. Or you guys in football, you look at your high speed running, right? If you're just looking at some of those are all important, but you got to put it all together from a whole overall, looking at the context of practice and the loads and how the loads ought to interplay with each other, right? So if you have a low player load per minute and maybe a higher load overall and maybe lower explosive efforts, right? Maybe you just, you might be worried, oh, we had a higher load today, but it's not really that bad because you probably were just out there for a longer period of time. Maybe it was a little bit more walkthrough. Maybe it wasn't as high intensity. Maybe you only got like 50 yards of high speed running, right? You really didn't do much, right, in that practice if you're just looking at the load. So you got to look at it all cumulatively and then put it all together. Like the way I look at it is like, for me, that play load per minute is that density metric, that load is our volume metric, and then explosive efforts is our intensity metric. And now I started looking at a little bit more explosive efforts per minute, which is kind of like your how much density intensity, right? Because you could have a very high player load per minute, right, for a basketball practice.
Vitruve has been my choice for VBT for years now, not only because of the encoder and how well it works with the app, and you can film movements with the camera and get live variable feedback in real time if you so choose to on the app, but the fact of the amount of content they have been pushing out to help coaches better understand VBT. It's not only just to move the bar faster. You can be working on what's the appropriate load for high rep sets based off velocity loss. You can be looking at velocity loss threshold between sets, in between reps. VBT is not just moving the bar fast. It's moving the bar fast with heavy weights. It's not just moving lightweight fast. And Vitruve has been at the forefront educating coaches on VBT and how to do it the right way. Check them out in the link down below.
And we might do skill work. And I look at my player load per minute, and it's similar to what it was for a game. But we don't have those explosive effort for it. So I can't say, hey, coach, oh, yeah, we had a similar game-like practice today because our player load per minute was the same as what we did in game. They were just moving around a lot. Normally, my highest player load per minute when I look at a drill in practice is usually our warm-up half the time, because we're just doing stuff so consecutively through those. If I just look at the warm-up for 5 to 7 minutes, however long we do it, it's back to back to back to back to back to back to back. So just looking at that drill now, if I look at live play for 20 minutes, there's a little bit of break. There's subbing, there's in and out. Our player load per minute is less. But if I say, oh, this one was a higher density or harder movement just because of the, it doesn't.
And if you say that, the sport coach is going to look at you like you have 8 heads and stop listening to you, because you don't, at the end of the day, understand sport, and that's their job.
Exactly.
And they're not going to listen to you in your recommendations because you don't get it. You're not speaking their language.
Yeah, and that's where you got to understand that is, especially with basketball, like, it's okay to have a couple of days where, if you plan this, right, you were supposed to be around this load or whatever it is, you go a little bit over, okay. Like, it's not that you had more explosive efforts than you thought today, okay, that's fine, right? I think you got to look at it from a more of a lens out, like take a step back. All right, are we, touching somewhat of our motto of, hey, for us, we try to go a moderate, a low, a high, and then a day off, and then a moderate, a high is what our 20-hour period would look like, right? And for me, it's like when I look at the data and when I look at what we did in practice, does that mimic that? And it's not about just the load. Again, like on those high days, it's like, all right, what live drills were we doing? Were we in the half court? Were we in the full court? Right? Was it down, back, down? Was it down, back, down +2? Like, what I've realized is that I get more high-intensity explosive efforts in the half court when we do half-court drills. Yep. Mainly because they get rest. So you might have, maybe it's 15 seconds on the shot clock. We'll do 6+6, so each team gets 6 possessions, right? One stays on the defense for 6 possessions, one stays on offense. And if, you look at it, but every time they reset, there's no transition. Right? So they're fresh. They're a little bit more recovered every time. So we'll get higher explosive efforts. So, the coach will be like, hey, we're a little high today. Did we do too much? I'm like, no, you're fine. It's different, right? It's just different. Tomorrow you're probably going to have less, even though we're going to go live, but it's going to be harder because the density is going to go up. So it's like,
and that's where, yes. And you're talking about the horizontal versus the verticalness of the field and what constraints that you're playing within them. And just like you even said there, like what muscles might be sore. Like, sure, in your half court, you might have more quads, glutes, soreness, and then maybe your hamstrings might be a little bit more sore when you open it up and go a little bit more vertical, because that's just inherently what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I think that's the thing where, being able, and we did a good job of this at Towson, and I think a lot of us were always kind of at practice and kind of got to saw what was going on in the context of practice. And And then being able to just understand what that feels like is a big thing though too, right? I enjoy playing basketball, right, and stuff. So I get a somewhat feel, not at the level that these guys do at all. Like I'm not gonna say that these guys play at a higher intensity. Why would we be able to keep up? But just being able to feel what that kind of feels like when you do those things, it helps.
Well, not only just how to play on the field, but what it feels like to lift after doing that.
Oh yeah, 100%. All those things, like they all come to play, and that's where I think you can't just look at one thing, the loads and the catapults and all that stuff, and just make a decision, going forward from there, right? I tell our coach our highest period of time, like I know for a fact this is 4 years of collecting data with catapult, going on year 5 now. We're gonna have our highest loads and our highest weekly loads during the month of October, which is great. That's what I want. Now, how we build there is what we're working on. All right, I want a little bit more of a step kind of ladder approach, and with some undulation weekly wise. But after that, the season kind of, you start tapering off a little bit. The games are your high days once you get in season, right? So then the rest of the week needs to be like, all right, our games are our 2 hardest practice. If we have 2 games that week, everything else needs to just kind of, prep for around that, right? Your practice is from a tactical standpoint, from a technical standpoint, right? Getting some live play. Like usually our Mondays, if we had a game Thursday, Saturday, let's say during conference play, right? Our Mondays, we would come in and it would be non-contact, a lot more skill. Maybe we'll do some 5-on-0 stuff, right? And then from there, Tuesday will probably be our harder day, but still we're touching some intensity, but we want to keep that a little bit shorter overall. So we might go a total of an hour and a half, but maybe only 30 to 45 minutes of that is actual playing. And then Wednesday ends up being a little bit more, pregame prep, right? We'll still do some live play on Wednesdays. And then, but it might be 15, 20 minutes, do some shooting. And then we come in the next day, we have our shoot around and we play, right? And then, Friday ends up being even a lighter version of Monday.
Dasher has completely changed the game for how I'm able to time my athletes, whether I'm doing ACL, max velo, or curvilinear running. Had the blues, had the blacks at Goldfinch. Now that I have the silvers, this has saved me so much time in setup, breakdown, if I'm going from Ankeny to Huxley, or from Ankeny to the Nevada location, or Nevada to Huxley, like wherever I got to go time athletes, it has made my ability to go from one place to another so much easier with the silvers. Strength coaches that have to go from one field to the other, or from the field to the court, this will help you save time. Now, in the spirit of saving time, you also have the ability to have an API interaction with TeamBuildr, so now you can see all the data on the back end. Seeing data on the back end, Dasher has a free app, a player profile app that will allow athletes to see their data. Over 6,000 coaches and athletes have done so. And if you want more than just the timing gates, if you check them out in the link down below, they have solutions to help you out with vertical jump, broad jump, RSI, all that. Check them out in the link down below.
It's mostly just shots. Maybe we touch on a couple tactical things. We'll walk through some stuff, and then we play again on Saturday, right? But from the load standpoint, half the time, even when it comes to in season, like I have an understanding of what the games look like, right? And the games don't change too much. Of course, overtime games going to increase loads, increase explosive efforts. They're going to be more fatigued from that. But once we even get in season, I don't even send our coach our game data, because the only thing that matters is did we win or lose at that point.
Amen.
We're not gonna make a decision based off we had too much load or something, unless it was an overtime game. But that's kind of more of an obvious, like, hey, all right, we don't even need the catapults to tell us, like, yeah, these guys are pretty beat up. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
I think you might be the first, like, you and I have had the conversation, but maybe some of our listeners out there haven't actually heard, like, wait a minute, I can use the data to tell the coaches that they can do more, or that, like, they're not so, like, yeah. Yes, don't just only think that your GPS is to say, coach, we need to do less. No, because like he just said, when you use it properly and you step up, or however you've implemented it best, you can then tell the coach, like, actually, coach, you've prepared the athletes and there's proof of it. So you can go do pretty much whatever you want within reason of a hard practice, and they're okay because we have proof.
I think so. We look at this as like two separate, right? Like what you're doing is, especially when you have GPS and you have a coach that you can kind of they work with you on the GPS. Like the practice is training, right? From a physiological, biomechanical, however you want to, cardiovascular standpoint. Our job is stress managers, right? As performance coaches, we give stress when we think we need it. We take away stress when we don't really need it, right? So that stress is something we're trying to manage. And the big thing is we got to look at that as that's like we're trying to apply that stress, right? So I want coach to do more at this time. Like there's a lot of times I told take one of my days leading up from 8 hour to 20 hour period, because that jump from 8 hour to 20 is so big. And that's my biggest worrisome area. Those 2 weeks. It's like you guys going into camp for football, right? It's just that big jump. Depending if you don't do it right, you could have some issues, right? So for me, it's like I'd rather you take one of my lift days and practice more in the week leading up to that, right? There has to be a build. We need to do more leading up to this period so that they're ready to handle those higher lows and everything like that. But for me, a lot of times I'm telling my coach, hey, and I want us to be higher than whatever week we have in season. I want you to train them hard. Now, how we get there is the hard part, because a lot of coaches like to go right away, hey, 20 hour starts, let's go, right? I'm like, you don't need to do that. You can build up to the next week, and that second week of 20 hours can be your week that you might push a little bit more, right? But Coach J.D. Mayo said this. He said a while back, is it our job more so to get them to, practice longer, practice at a higher intensity and more frequency, something along those lines. And at the end of the day, I think it is that. Like that is our jobs, to get them to handle practices better, right? But to do that, you have to be not afraid to be like, do more, right? And not look at GPS and load management as, oh, do less. No, load management is meant to manage load. That means you can also increase it when you need to increase it, right? It's not, I think that's the negative connotation that happened, but a lot of even sport coaches look at it as that, oh, you want me to do less. No, I want you to do more here. Sometimes it's like, you're not even doing enough. Keep pushing, right? As long as it's done, in a periodized manner, I think you're pretty good. And sometimes it's going to be random, and that's okay. Games are going to be random, right? And a lot of times it's like, well, if you built enough capacity and enough, you did it the right way up front, even if there is randomization later, they should be okay, as long as it's not randomization for like an extended period of time where you're just having spike, right? But if there's a couple spikes in there, they should be able to handle that if you periodize your practices and you prepared your guys to handle practice as well with your summer or preseason training.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of trying to make anti-fragile athletes, is it can't be 100% predictable. Like sport is not. And that's something that Moses has talked about on the show, Moses Cabrera, who's like, this whole world of do less, like this do less coaching, the pendulum swung too far, because maybe back in the early 2000s, it was, overload volume of too much, like puke till you die. Then minimal effective dose became like the new hot topic. And it's like, now that pendulum needs to start coming back towards max recoverable volume. What's the most amount of work we can do and still recover and push that needle?
Yeah.
What do you talked about that fascial word a lot. How does that relate? How do you use that in your world? Because we've, you and I both have obviously used the Viper before, and Chapman has done some of the applied functional science stuff. And I had a phone call with Doug Gray, Gary's son, and done some of the Gray Institute stuff. So what does fascia training in that world mean to you?
To me, it's at the end of the day, it's just exposing the guys. It's just trying to increase their movement vocabulary at the end of the day, right? Can they handle and control their space better than when we got them, right? And, Chapman used to say this all the time, if they have a big bubble right around them, right, how well can they move to the left into that bubble and control their body, right? All right, if they step this way and control their body in, upright plane, all right, now can they step this way and lunge into that plane and control their body in a deep knee flexion or ankle dorsiflexion, whatever it is, right? And all you're trying to do is just, all right, how well can I increase that bubble and that capacity to handle, with the CFS stuff, applied functional science, they have their 10 observational essentials. I can't name them off the top of my head right now, but it's like It's like your load, your volume, your rate of loading, the height, the distance, all those things kind of factor in. And when we do our training, a lot of this I do this every day when we warm up. Our coaches will, for sure tell me, do you need to warm them up for 10 minutes? I'm like, well, my warm up is my training too. I'm not just warming them up to do stuff. Like I look at the warm up as training, right? So I have a lot of our fascial stuff where we'll touch some reaches, different lunge matrices, different stuff like that within our warm up every day, right? And then sometimes in our lift, we'll have certain things where we're loading them in certain planes, right? And it's just being able to, get in and out of different positions well and control those movements well. To me, is just fascia. It's just an interconnection of everything in the body, right? At the end of the day, I can't tell you that I know it to T, all the different lines and everything like that. I have a decent understanding of it, but a lot of it is just looking at how guys handle their current space and how they move within their current space. And then, all right, let's look to increase this capacity to handle this space better, or, be able to step a little bit farther and be able to control space, be able to reach a little bit longer, control space and control your body.
Yeah, it's that different strength at length, and it's the whole like inter, because you have your inter, but then also or intra, so the muscle itself, but then also inter, so how the muscles connect and synchronize, and rate coding, that things have been talked about for a while. And just how you can have that strength at length, which kind of came about through the FRC stuff too. Like not only having strength in that middle range of a bicep curl, for instance, but like being strong at the very end when your arm is extended, or also at the top, because the minute load exceeds your capacity, there's injury. So if this is just a way to put some capacity through the muscles, joints, tendons, ligaments, that fascial system, right, and put some layers of strain and stress on the body, now we're doing that in low-level ways before it gets exposed in sport, because you're already going to get strength at length when you're playing basketball, reaching for a ball, or whatever is going to happen. But you have a low level, have exposed the athlete in the tissue in training beforehand. Therefore, the tissue is not going to overreact and think like, oh, I can't be there, and then potentially go through, some version of a low or traumatic injury.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's kind of how I look at it, man. Like it's, I actually try to bridge a lot of the FRC approaches to it and applied functional science approach to it. I think if you're able to mirror those two together, I'm still working on how that system to get that system to work. But if you mirror those two together, I think you can build a really robust athlete with that. So a lot of things.
You also train your athletes really hard. And like me personally, and if anybody follows you on social and you actually post your stuff, like I know you're having your athletes trap bar deadlift heavy, or, maybe you're going to tweak the system and whatever, because you understand the principle of, all right, I need a heavy stimulus for central nervous system adaptation, and also for nervous system excitement, and just training the tendon to handle the strength gains and the somewhat pliabilityness of it when you're training in the weight room, versus just the contraction, violent plyometric nature of playing sport. So you'll change up, whether it's a trap bar deadlift, if you're going to regular back squat, if you're going to box squat, if you're going to hand support split squat, or hand support back squat. You change up the way you do it, the method, because you understand the principle, but you still train your athletes heavy. You understand that the fascia, the applied functional science stuff, whatever you want to call it, FRC, is a piece of the puzzle. It's part of your, it's your screwdriver, but you also still have a hammer and you have a buzz saw. I think the problem that these coaches, anybody listening to it that stuck with us this long, it's just like what we talked about with the max velo or the max recoverability, and not doing something in the middle. You're not going to hire a carpenter that, you're outside, if they're like, hey, Amit, I'm going to hang up your shingles, but I'm not using a hammer or a nail gun. I'm just going to screw these things in. You'd be like, bro, there's a way more efficient way. Strength coaches, what I'm rambling here is, it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the entire puzzle. And there are too many strength coaches out here trying to only shove lift heavy as the thing down your throat, or only do these fascia, water bag, tidal tank, Viper exercises, and that's all you need to do. And I think what you've heard from both of us now is you need to do both to help your athletes be good.
100%. There's a bleed that you have to have between both, and there's kind of like just a periodized approach to it as well, right? Like for me, I want to see my athletes be able to handle load, right? To me, strength is not just how much weight, it's how you move it, right? And how you're able to control it, right? So if I'm able to, like you said, I squat my guys, right? We say bar squat full. I try to get them deep knee flexion. A lot of times on the slant board and everything like that. And we'll usually start with some kind of, during the summer, we'll go from isos to eccentrics to maybe a little bit more concentric work, right? But I want them to be able to hold positions, right? To me, that's strength, right? If I could take a kid,
that's what Doyle's definition of strength Doyle's definition that we defined was strength. Strength is strength was maintaining posture under load.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's just different positions you put them in. To make them a more robust athlete, you just need to do it in different planes and take that principle, just do it in a bunch of different planes and different stimuluses and get them good at doing that first. And then, all right, let's try to make it change some kind of variable to make it a little bit more difficult. You know, as you're doing slow and heavy at first, and then you move to a little bit more fast, right, in these different planes, in these positions, right? But you got to do both. Like you said, you have to have some kind of load underneath them. And, you know, for my guys, if somebody's able to, you know, we have guys who can hold, you know, it may not seem heavy for a lot of people, but for me, it's like, well, I got this 6'6" guy being able to hold an 8-second 8-second isometric in the bottom of a squat, right? To me, that's pretty strong. I don't need to see him squat 315 or 405 or anything like that. That's strong. Not many guys can hold 8 seconds down at the bottom with a deep knee bend, right? He's able to get through a full range of motion and be able to control it, right? That's great, right? And then you move from there, you know, even from a unilateral standpoint, with different kind of lunge variations, all those things. And then over time, now you add in different contralateral movements within what you're doing, reaching, pulling, you know, whatever is, add the rate in there as you get closer to season to mimic a little bit what they might see as the speed changes. But yeah, I mean,
it's also just it's a tweak. So anybody that's not familiar with Gary Gray's work, like tweak, it's a way to change. If you're doing a lateral lunge, just again, normal, you're tweaking the tempo, but then you could also be tweaking, again, that they call it transition, but it's the amortization phase from eccentric to concentric. Like, you can tweak that. You can tweak the rows. You can tweak a press, because again, it's like, sure, you might not put the same load through the body, but you now are, there's a difference between what happens at my right leg when I'm doing a lateral lunge to the left and I'm holding a dumbbell in my right hand and the dumbbell is just going vertically down, versus, let's say I took a lighter dumbbell and I lunge down to the left and I'm pressing the dumbbell up overhead. Like, I just lengthened my body a little bit more and exposed something that, hey, now it's got to handle that stress of going through those different transformational zones of the fact that movement is not only in frontal, sagittal, or transverse when you may move frontal, because of, again, the interdependency of the interconnectedness of muscle of, not only just the fascial system, but the intermuscle connectivity of groin to hip flexor and just that synchronization.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. It's like the same thing as, like, you know, just doing different lunge variations, but reaching forward, reaching to the left, reaching to the right. You're stressing the system differently. And I think the way my approach is, like, hey, especially from the summer going toward the rest of the year, is, all right, let's load them first. Let's get them strong in the basic movement patterns, right? And then from there, all right, now we got them pretty firm and strong and being able to control these movements in the normal patterns. Now let's start adding in these variations of reachings, changing the rate, and all those things like that. And you know, I do recommend the applied functional science course, because I think it those 10 observational essentials it opens up your mind for a lot of different programming opportunities, because you just got to, people think you got to change the whole exercise. You don't really need to change the exercise. You just got to change how you're loading it, or the direction you might be reaching, or all these things. And just over time, you're just trying to improve their capacity to handle movement and control movement at the end of the day, right? It's you know, from an offensive standpoint, you're trying to create space. From a defensive standpoint, you're trying to take away space. So, you know, when you look at basketball, that's really all you're trying to do. And if I can get you better at creating offensively, if I can get you better at, you know, reacting and taking away, that's, at the end of the day, my job area. Not the technical, that's coaches, right? Going from there.
Amen. I appreciate it. It's been an hour with you. You got dad mode. I appreciate you coming on to talk about all this, brother. Be well, and we'll be in touch.
All right, brother. I'll catch you.
Thanks for watching that video. If you enjoyed it, click right here for videos just like that, and make sure you click here to subscribe to our channel. Have a great rest of your day.